This is Regini Vaidyanathan with NewsHour, coming to you live from the BBC in London. As we've already heard in the programme, today marks 80 years since the defeat of Nazi Germany and the end of the Second World War in Europe. After a conflict which had lasted nearly 6 years and cost the lives of more than 20 million people in Europe alone, May the 8th, 1945, was a day of exhausted relief for the Allies and, of course, a day of celebration. The war in the Pacific against Japan would, of course, continue for another 3 months. Well, today has been one of reflection for many people, including 89-year-old Maureen Hunt, who at the start of the war was living in the east of London with her family. Well, Maureen features in a new book called Blitz Kids, and it's co-authored by Duncan Barrett. The book tells the stories of British children during the war. I've been speaking to both of them, and Maureen began by telling me about the day her life was changed due to the German bombing campaign known as the Blitz.
It was a Saturday afternoon, a beautiful day, and the warden came round and advised my mum to go into the main public shelter, which we did. It was a factory right near us. They had a cellar, and when we arrived there, it was very, very crowded, but within a few seconds, the warning was going, and we heard the planes coming over, and it was dreadful. We could hear the noise. And when we came out of the shelter, the whole row of houses where we lived, including our house, was down to the ground, and the road at the back of us also down to the ground. And it was a terrible, terrible feeling. We just stood there with my mum, and we just couldn't believe what was happening there. It was full of smoke and fire, and everybody was just standing there completely dazed.
And Maureen, you were just a few weeks away from your 4th birthday when that happened.
Right. Yes, I was just 2 weeks away. And we stood there, and I suddenly realised I was looking at my sister's school satchel. That's where we knew it was our house. And a couple of weeks before my birthday, my dad, as a surprise, gave me a lovely little kitten. And I called her Dinky. And we went along a little further away, and suddenly, unfortunately, I saw her there completely gone with the bomb. And I certainly cried a lot. And Mum said to me, "Don't worry, we'll have another little cat later when things get better." All we had was just the clothes we had on.
And your dad went back to see what happened at the time?
Yes, actually, Dad was on what they called fire watch, and he had to look out for where all the fires were and going to inform all the fire brigades. And someone came in to him and said, "Gurley Street has got it." And he stood up and he just ran along Fairfield Road, along Bow Road, down into Devons Road. He turned the corner, and the look on his face when he saw us both standing there, Mum and myself, and it was a look of relief. And he came up and gave us a big cuddle, and that was it. My sister and brother was at my grandmother's at that time, so it was just Mum and I standing there in this complete situation. The one thing that I always recognise is I've made me a very, very strong person. Over the last 20 years, we've had a lot of personal stress and trauma in my family, but I was able to carry it through and deal with it with this strength I'm sure I gained through the war.
And let me bring Duncan in. You've collected a number of stories, not just from Maureen in London, but from other people who were children during the Blitz. Just tell us about how typical a story like Maureen's was when you were doing the research for this book.
She and her mum are incredibly lucky to have survived that bombing. I mean, the neighbours next door, I think, they had twin boys who were killed along with their whole family. We interviewed about 80-odd people for this book all over the country, not just in London, but Birmingham, Liverpool, other cities that were blitzed badly during the war. And yes, those stories of loss, whether it's of family members, of pets, it was a common experience, sadly.
And just tell us about some of the other people that you spoke to and heard stories about then, Duncan.
Well, they weren't all doom and gloom. A lot of people told me they actually really enjoyed the war. I mean, kids are kids, and I suppose whatever the circumstances, they find a way to have fun, they find a way to enjoy themselves. They turn the rubble into their new playground. And I guess a lot of them were protected by their parents to the extent they didn't really always understand how much danger they were really in.
Maureen.
Yes, absolutely. You didn't, first of all, because you were so young. But you noticed a difference in your daily routine. You couldn't play with your friends. You couldn't go into their house. They couldn't come into your house as they normally would. And the adults seemed to be walking around with a very, very concerned, anxious look all the time.
Just tell me about your personal memories when you learnt that the war in Europe had ended.
It was absolutely fantastic. First of all, the day before we heard a rumour that the war was over, but Mum was very concerned. She said it must be made official on the radio in case we get our hopes dashed. Well, Mr. Churchill came on the following day and he actually said, the war in Europe is over. Well, we all stood up, we all started crying, and then we all started laughing. It was very, very emotional. And within a few seconds, all the doors opened where we were living then, and out came all the bunting to put on the windows and the doors. And we had a lovely neighbour next door but one. He was a very good pianist. And he brought his piano out on the pavement with the help of two other neighbours, and he started playing all the lovely songs, and songs that I'd actually never heard before.
What sort of songs was he playing, Maureen?
Well, first of all, he started to play Roll Out the Barrel, and then it was Knees Up Mother Brown. And I'd never heard of these, but it was such a wonderful day. And, well, we opened the doors, as I've just said, and people walking by, we just ran out and hugged them. They didn't know the result. And they threw their hats in the air. Everybody had a little dance around. I mean, it was 6 years and it was a long, long time, but it was a marvellous, marvellous feeling.
Wonderful to hear those memories from 89-year-old Maureen Hunt as she looks back on VE Day. We also heard from Duncan Barrett. That's it from me and the team here on NewsHour.